Hey everybody, welcome back to Matt Mondier Music. And today on Music Word of the Week, we're going to talk about timbre. We're going to cover the definition and some timbre terms. We're going to cover the materials that are used in creating instruments. We're going to talk about how the sound is produced. And we're going to cover the different methods or techniques in order to produce these sounds. Stay tuned. Timbre is the unique way an instrument sounds. That sounds simple, doesn't it? Nah, not really, because there's a whole lot of different things that go into defining timbre of our musical sounds. We're going to have to consider the materials that are being used, and this includes the human voice, because that contributes sound. We have to think about how is the sound being made? How's the sound being produced? What are the methods that are being used? But we also have to consider pitch. We also have to consider volume. Now, I know we haven't covered pitch yet in a video, and we will cover that later. But the really easy thing with pitch is you have to think about how high or how low the sound is. And don't confuse it with dynamics. Not the same as volume. We can have one instrument be able to create many different timbres based off the various pitches, meaning various high and low sounds that it can create. It can also change the timbre based off of the volume, how loud or how soft it is. The different methods in making these sounds is also going to be a big contributor, or the different materials that it can be made out of. So all of these things are going to contribute to our timbre. Now we can also have two completely different instruments using the exact same volume and the exact same pitch. However, difference of material and the production of sound, once again, creates the difference between these two, uniquely different instruments. So let's think about like the airflow of a wind instrument. The faster that the air flow, it's going to be a harder flow of air, therefore it could maybe produce a harsher sound. If you have a slower flow of air, it can create a little bit more smoother, a little bit lighter type of sound. Or if you think about the velocity of a drum hit, if you're lightly hitting the drum, it's going to be not only softer in volume, but it's going to be a little bit lighter in the overall sound production. Or if you put a lot more velocity behind it and you get a louder hit, it's going to have a little bit more of an aggressive sound. It could potentially sound maybe even more violent if that's what you're going for. But these types of differences are going to create various timbres, even if they're going to be on the exact same instrument. So that's kind of our overall definition of timbre itself. Now, of course, we have a lot of different terms that we can use for timbre. Different terms such as bright, dark, dull, tinny, flat, smooth, breathy. All of these different things can help us kind of describe our timbre. And another thing we kind of can think about is what we would refer to as tone quality or tone color. Much like, we can visually see different colors and identify the different, the different ways that those colors are being produced. We also can hear different tone qualities or tone colors in the sounds that are being produced. So much like what we were talking about with the velocity or the airflow, the faster or the harder something is being produced, it can sound more harsher, or it can sound maybe a little bit brighter, a little bit more aggressive. All of these are different things that we need to take into consideration. Materials that are being used, the most common ones are going to be wood or metal for the majority of our instruments. We can use plastic, we can use rubber, strings are involved, like nylon. Pretty much anything that you can get a sound out of, that material can be used. Even just kind of like patting your leg, blowing across a bottle, any of those things are going to produce sound, okay? And even, as I kind of mentioned briefly before, the human voice, that also creates timbre. Anything that's going to make sound it's going to have a timbre behind it. Okay, so how is sound produced? Well, basically, there's an instrument classification that's really kind of broken down into 5 categories. And these are going to basically kind of tell us how specifically the sound of any of the instruments are produced. So we have the idiophones, we have the membramophones, we have the chordophones, the aerophones, and the electrophones. Now, I know all those sound like really big terms, but I'm going to explain each one of these and hopefully it'll make a whole lot more sense. So let's start with the idiophones. This is all going to be instruments that are based around the idea that the sound is produced based off of the natural vibration of the instrument without the assistance of some type of membrane or a string. Anything that's going to have a string where the sound is produced by that, that's not part of it. So some examples of these would be like cymbals, an African thumb piano like a kalimba, okay? Castanets, claves. Any of these types of instruments are going to be categorized in the idiophones. Mainly percussion instruments are going to be part of this. Now on the other side, the membramophones, this sound is going to be from the vibration with the assistance of some type of membrane. So primarily, like I had said before, where we're going to have a skin that's going to be stretched across the drum. So snare drum, bass drum, really any hand percussion like, bongos, congas, any of those are going to be part of the membramophones. Now let's go into the third one, the chordophones. That's my favorite one. The chordophones is going to be with the assistance of strings. So anything where strings are producing the sound itself. So guitar, bass, any of the zither instruments, the harp, any of the orchestral instruments like violin, cello, string bass, the viola, the harp, any of those are going to be part of the chordophones. Then we also have the aerophones. This is going to be, the sound is produced by airflow, okay? So clarinet, trumpet, the tuba, the flute, recorder, and many, many others. And I know I'm not naming all of them, but these are just basic examples of these. So production of airflow is going to be the aerophones. And then lastly, there's going to be the electrophones, where sound is produced primarily through amplification or electricity. This is mainly going to be based around like synthesizers or digital keyboards. And this is not really a category that's really heavily cataloged at the moment, but it is still considered a primary category. Even the use of a computer software instrument is going to be part of this same category. So any way that you can generate sound through the use of some type of electronic is going to be part of this category. All right, so for our last section, we're going to talk more about the methods and how the sound is going to be produced. And this is going to be kind of followed more with talking more about our instrument families. And this is going to be broken up into 5 different families or categories as well. We're going to start off with the most natural one, and that's going to be the voices. Any of the sound being produced with the human voice. That's going to be in our first category. Second one, we're going to talk about the percussion family. With the percussion family, there's going to be the 3 S's. We can either strike it, shake it, or scrape it. Percussion instruments are all going to follow one or all 3 of those things: striking, shaking, or scraping. The string family, the sound is being produced with, bowing or plucking of a string. And of course, our orchestral string instruments and our more modern instruments are going to fall into this category. Piano actually kind of falls into being a percussion and a string instrument, because you're not only pressing down the keys, but whenever you press down a key, if you've ever looked inside of a piano, there's these little hammers that will actually hit the string it will actually strike it, so you're actually hitting the string, but it's causing the vibration of a string, so therefore piano is actually kind of a double in this case. For our fourth family, we're going to talk about the winds. Those are actually typically divided into two separate ones, the woodwinds and the brass winds, really kind of more shortened to brass, material made out of wood or material made out of metal, and that's going to be with the production of airflow blowing into an instrument. And then of course the very last one will be the electrics, or the electronics, and that's kind of more with the assistance of amplification or using some type of electronic to help it. I know that sounds very similar to the electrophones. This one gets a little bit more free, that you can basically basically amplify almost any instrument, which makes it really kind of unique in this way. Probably the easiest one to think about is the guitar. You can have an acoustic guitar where the sound is just being made primarily by itself, or you can put some type of electronic in it and plug it into an amplifier, and therefore it can become a lot louder. And you can do this with any of your percussion instruments, any of your string instruments, any of your wind instruments. And you can do this with your voice too, with the assistance of a microphone. The electronics is kind of more of a side category in a way, but it's still something really important to consider. So that's our video on timbre. I know we covered a lot of stuff, and hopefully you got a lot out of it and you really enjoyed it. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, please leave them down below. Please feel free to drop a like, and please ring the bell so you can get notifications when there's a new video posted. Also, if you haven't checked out my artist page, Fret Level 0, please go check that out. And you can find that out on YouTube, Apple Music, Spotify, all major streaming services. So please go check that out as well. I'll see you next week for our next Music Word of the Week. Take care.